we're good.
Okay, well, good enough for local government. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call to order the Administrative Matters meeting of the Larimer County Board of Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. I'm Tom Donnelly. I'm the chairman of the Board of Commissioners this year, joined by John Kafalos, Commissioner from District 1, Steve Johnson, Commissioner from District 2. Stephanie Grosskopf from the Larimer County Clerk and Recorder's Office is here to keep the minutes of this meeting. Linda Hoffman, our county manager, is at the controls. And Brenda Jemison, our business operations manager in the Commissioner's office, is here to time the public comment portion of this meeting. It is a tradition of this Board of Commissioners to begin this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, so we'd like to ask you to stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks everybody for that. First item of business this morning for the board is public comment. I didn't see anyone signed up in the on the sheet outside for public comment, but if you'd like to make public comment this morning, we'd invite you to come to the microphone and give us your name and give us your comments. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion of this meeting. We'll move on to approval of the minutes for the week of August 5th, 2019. Commissioner Kafalos.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve the minutes for the week of August 5th, 2019.
Very good. We have a motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion is passed 3-0. Brenda Jemison is going to review the draft schedule for the week of August 19th, 2019. Hi, Brenda.
Good morning, Commissioners. On Monday, August 19th at 1:30 p.m., you have the Community Development Work Session with Lori Cadridge, Interim Director of Community Planning, Infrastructure, and Resources. At 3 p.m., you have the land use items with the Development Review Team in the hearing room on the first floor. At 6 p.m., Commissioner Kafalos will attend the Windsor Town Board meeting at Windsor Town Hall in Windsor. On Tuesday, August 20th at 8 a.m., Commissioners Donnelly and Kafalos will attend the Volunteers of America 2019 Senior Corps Impact and Appreciation Breakfast. That's at the Drake Center here in Fort Collins. At 9 a.m., you have Administrative Matters. That's this meeting here in this room. At 12 p.m., Commissioner Kafalos may attend the Community Corrections Advisory Board meeting in the Carter Lake Conference Room on the first floor. At 1:30, you have administrative direction to the county management. That's in the Sprague Lake Conference Room here on the second floor. At 7 p.m., Commissioner Kafalos may attend the LaPorte Planning Advisory Committee meeting at the West Fort Collins Water District in LaPorte. On Wednesday, August 21st at 4:30 p.m., you have the Planning Commission County Commissioner Joint Work Session, and that's in the Lake Loveland Conference Room here on the second floor. On Thursday, August 22nd at 7:30 a.m., Commissioner Johnson will attend the Urban Renewal Authority Board half-day retreat, and that's at Block 1 at 428 Linden Street in Fort Collins. At 12 p.m., Commissioner Kafalos will host a community conversation at the Red Feather Lakes Community Library in Red Feather Lakes. At 2 p.m., Commissioner Kafalos will meet with the Glacier View Meadows homeowners at the Mountain Meetin' Place at 1417 Green Mountain Drive in Livermore. At 4:15 p.m., Commissioners will hold a special meeting for the certification of the abstractive assessment report for the Assessor's Office. At 5 p.m., Commissioner Donnelly may attend the Open Lands Advisory Board meeting at the Loveland campus in Loveland. At 5:30 p.m., Commissioner Kafalos may attend a community meeting for the Family Center at 309 Hickory Street in Fort Collins. On Friday, August 23rd, I do have an open schedule for you. On Saturday, August 24th at 9:30 a.m., Commissioners Donnelly and Johnson will participate in the Corn Roast Festival Parade in downtown Loveland. That would be all for the week.
Great. Any questions, corrections, additions for Brenda at this time? No? Very good. Thanks, Brenda. We'll move on to consent agenda this morning. 2 abatements, 3 agreements, 3 deeds, 10 resolutions for land use, 3 miscellaneous items, 6 liquor license issuances. Would either of my colleagues like to remove any of these items from the consent agenda for additional information?
I would not.
No, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of the consent agenda for August 13th, 2019.
Very good. We have a motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion is passed 3-0. We'll move on. Comments from Commissioners' guests. Guests? Do either of my colleagues have guests this morning?
I do not.
No? Okay. It's that time of year, as you can see from the beautiful photo being displayed here in the Commissioners' Conference Room for our annual Rocky Mountain National Park update. And our superintendent of the National Park, Darla Seidels, is with us. and Kyle Patterson, who's the public information officer. And they wore their uniforms, so we're really excited. Except their hat, they didn't bring their hats. It really would have made the outfit, but otherwise, you're looking great. You look absolutely.
We'll remember
fabulous.
that next time.
Okay.
So noted.
Yes.
Superintendent, welcome. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you very
us.
much. We're very happy to be here. Always good to meet with y'all every year. Just going to give you a brief update. I'm Darla Seidels, superintendent, as Commissioner O'Donnelly said, and this is my sidekick, Kyle Patterson. She's a public information officer and management assistant. So we're going to tag team this presentation, go through a few park updates. Uh-oh, that didn't work?
That's all right. Try this guy. Just arrows.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. How about that? No?
Only about half the stuff ever works on there.
Too much technology.
Here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It'd be better.
Now
with-
we go.
There, okay,
I wish
we
we were
got
in
it.
National-
Got it
National
going on.
Park. Look at that guy.
Yeah. Y'all know about pikas, right?
Yeah, there he is. Like Commissioner Johnson.
So I'm sure y'all have the same issue here in Fort Collins. The best time, the only time of year to be doing pavement preservation is in the summer, when we have millions of people in the park. So this summer is no different, and next summer will be similar too. We're doing pavement preservation on some of these lesser-known areas like Bear Lake Road, Trail Ridge Road. So it's causing a fair amount of delays and congestion, more than usual. So just a heads up that this will be going on probably for another month or so through the end of September. That we did get an add-on the Grand Lakes side there from the Colorado River Trailhead down. So this is the work that's going on this year. There's one-way traffic, 20 mile an hour. Today and tomorrow, they're actually paving the Bear Lake parking lot. So
Oh, cool.
it's as you might suspect, it's causing a lot of people to not come if they're smart. But if they don't read the news, then they show up and they're either delayed or significantly delayed because they need to go back into town and take the shuttle. Just a heads up that we did sign the FONSI, our regional director signed the finding of no significant impact on our exotic plant management plan. And this gives us a number of tools to be able to manage invasive plant species. And this is, of course, very important for us from the standpoint of encouraging that diverse landscape ecology that we need to have to support the wildlife. And it also helps to keep the wildlife or the wildfires and those sorts of things from getting as large when we can take care of those plants and not let them take over. This slide was actually, we were planning some prescribed fires and then it kept raining.
Yeah.
So we actually haven't had the conditions that we need to be able to be successful with prescribed fires. But this is obviously something that we're very keen on doing, and in particular around wildland urban interface areas like Estes Park, in order to protect the communities if there, is a large wildfire that were to happen. We've got 5 drainages that come directly down into Estes Park, and so that's a very big concern. We're working directly with the Forest Service on working on particular areas close to the urban interface. So while we don't have the prescription right now to do this, as soon as we get the prescription, we'll be likely going forward with some of these burns.
You have a fire crew on site in the
We do.
national park every year.
Yes,
I mean,
we
I
do.
thought you did. Okay. And
Yes.
when are they there from? They're
They
probably not
usually
this
come in
season.
May and they leave in around October,
Okay.
at the end of October. We also have one of the 2 hotshot crews that the National Park Service manages in the entire Park Service, and they're in the park. They're housed in Rocky Mountain National Park, but they serve the United States, and actually they were just in Canada last month. So we've got a lot of fire personnel in the park.
Good.
Just a couple of quick updates. The Fall River entrance, that's the second busiest entrance after the Beaver Meadows entrance. We are planning to do some work there in the next couple of years, and that includes adding a fast pass lane. And this should help, with some of the congestion right there at the entrance station. We've got a major trail project at Alluvial Fan. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that was taken out in the flood of 2013.
Yep.
And so we're doing a lot of work here with bridges and ADA accessible trails. The entire trail won't be ADA accessible, but a large part of it will be. And then we're working with the town of Estes Park to put in this connector trail. Estes Park is putting in a 4-mile trail from the town up to Aspen Glen, and then we're putting in a connector trail, make a nice little bike opportunity for folks that come to the park. And lastly, before I turn it over to Kyle, just, I know y'all are familiar with this. Housing values have increased significantly in the Estes Park area in particular. This has definitely been a challenge for us in hiring and retaining staff because there's not a lot of housing to go around in Estes Park. So that has been a challenge for us. We got a couple of visits from former Secretary Zinke over the last 2 years, and they were quite surprised at the condition of our housing, and we were able to get some funding for new housing. So we've got some what we call park models up on the right-hand side. Some of you refer to those as tiny homes. And then we've got some dorms on the lower left. This whole initiative kind of gave more attention to housing across the entire Park Service, and as a result, we'll be getting more funding over the next 3 years for a few triplexes and things like that. So it should help when we're able to build housing too. It helps the surrounding towns because they're also in the same boat.
Sure. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Darla. I'm wondering where are these houses located, and also based on any kind of needs assessment that you've done, what are the gaps that you still need to address, and how do you plan to address them?
Okay. These particular housing units are in the primary headquarters area near Beaver Meadows Visitor Center. So if you're familiar with the big main visitor center there, just outside of Estes Park, we've got a large housing development just down and, adjacent to the visitor center.
Below the backcountry permit office?
Yes,
back in
exactly. Yes, and all of these are in that area. We're planning to build some on the west side as well. So in terms of the gap, we have done a housing management plan, and it shows we're still missing at least 30 beds. So that would be to kind of bring us up to where we are really, needing it, but it still doesn't fill the need. About 10% of our staff live in park housing, and they do pay rent at the market rate. And that money goes back into the housing program. But everyone else has to find housing outside. And we do have people that live here in Fort Collins and drive every day. Fort Collins, Loveland, Longmont. So it's a continuous challenge to be able to get the staff, and especially with some of our lower graded positions, they don't see the need to come up to Estes Park to work when they can get some great jobs down here along the Front Range.
What is the nature of your workforce? How many folks are employed in the national park?
We have about 150 permanent employees,
And then seasonally?
and then seasonal we hire around 250.
Okay.
Our budgets have been relatively flat over the last 10 years. Actually, 10 years ago, our budget was, I believe, a little bit larger than it is just this year.
And you're probably one of the few parks that could almost be self-sustaining based on your revenue, or is that not?
Oh, definitely,
You're-
yes. The
you're a
revenue that we
revenue
collect
generator.
at the entrance stations is actually surpasses our budget, our base budget.
You're the only piece of the federal government that actually does do that, by the way.
And it works, thank goodness for that, right?
Okay.
And we've just been given authorization to use those funds that we collect at the entrance stations to hire permanent employees. We haven't gotten the specific instructions on how to do that yet, but that is a significant progress forward in helping us to manage the number of visitors that we're seeing. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle. She's going to talk a little bit about our visitation.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for your time this morning. So I think the last time we met, we talked about this at length. So we'll just kind of do a quick recap. So as you can see, our visitation has increased significantly, particularly since 2012. We've seen a 42% increase in our visitation. So 1.5 million more visitors since 2012. Last year, we were almost 4.6 million. We were the third most visited national park in the country again last year, as we were in 2016. I like to share some of our top 10 visitation days, and it varies from year to year, but as you can see, our season continues to expand, and sometimes our staffing, doesn't necessarily, that's the number of vehicles that are coming in the park. So if you were to look at 11 through 20, you'd see other days where we had 10,000 plus vehicle days in the park. We also continue to see weekends be our highest visited days. So it doesn't matter whether it's July or September or February, weekends continue to be a significant increase in visitation. For some of us that are visual learners, throw some photographs in here as well to
There must be a
highlight.
Oak right outside of the screen
Yes.
there. Yeah, something.
So continue to think about, as we look at our 4 tenants, which we'll talk about here in a minute. This is Trail Ridge Road on a busy July day. No cars have been photoshopped in these photos, I promise. So this really highlights Alpine Visitor Center, which we'll talk about in a minute, and our continued concerns about safety with this level of visitation. So those of you that are familiar with Trail Ridge Road, you can see that the line of cars snakes up to Gore Range overlook. So we get to the point, which we have to not allow people to come into Alpine Visitor Center. Otherwise, we have, significant safety concerns of people just kind of in gridlock. As many of you know, we've had a shuttle system in the Bear Lake Road corridor since the 70s, so we've already been using a shuttle as a way to manage visitation as far as just access and give people a good experience. In the early 2000s, we joined in partnership with the town of Estes Park, and we have our hiker shuttle. And you can see these are the lines at the hiker shuttle at the Estes Park Visitor Center. So the wait times can exceed an hour easily in our hiker shuttle as well. It's just again to show you a few visuals. So we've talked a little bit about this with you all before, but because we're a federal agency, we have to have an acronym. And so it's DUVAS, Day Use Visitor Access Strategy, because what we're really focusing on is day use in the park. We already have an overnight permit system where we have 5 front country campgrounds. We have over 260 wilderness backcountry campsites where we already have a permit system, and we have for decades. What we're really seeing is this huge increase in day use. So people coming to the park for maybe a couple of hours or maybe 6 hours. We're not the only ones that are facing this. The Forest Service is facing this. There's heavy regional visitation. Larimer County Parks and Open Space is certainly dealing with this as well, where trailheads are, spilling out into area roads. So we're really working with some of our partners in the Forest Service. We're a member of the NOCO places that I'm sure you all are familiar with as well, really working with other agencies so that we're looking at this very similar interagency visitor use planning process. So when we started on this process really in 2016 with our huge increase in visitation in 2015, we look at it basically, we break it down into 4 areas. What's this level of visitation? How is it impacting park resources? We're seeing, expanded social trails. We're seeing significant human waste increase in our backcountry. Staff and visitor safety, congested roadways does seem to lead to a different behavior when it comes to visitors, whether it's visitor to visitor or visitor to staff or visitor to volunteers. Visitor experience, what are these long lines and congestion doing for visitor experience? For some people, they might be more comfortable with crowds. Other people are seeking solitude and don't want that. And then really, what can our operational capacity take? We already have an $84 million deferred maintenance backlog. So to try to do more and more facilities when we can't really take necessarily care of the ones we have, that's something we have to look at for the future as well. So you may recall that in 2016 we started taking interim actions in those highly congested areas. For those of you that know the park, you could recite these as well. It's the Bear Lake Road corridor, it's the Wild Basin corridor, and Alpine Visitor Center. And these are areas too where roads kind of dead end into places. Alpine Visitor Center, we have Old Fall River Road and Trail Ridge Road. We've really been addressing roadside parking. We've had a lot of impacts with vegetation and safety concerns along roadsides. We've reconfigured parking lots. We've really tried to convey to the public that if they plan ahead, they'll have a much better experience when coming to the park. So the whole concept of hiking early, hiking late, and that whole 10 to 3 window in the park is very, very busy and congested. We have volunteers at the Estes Park Visitor Center as well outside the park providing information. And then we also had a robust research project a couple of years ago highlighting when we do put restrictions in place in Bear Lake, where do people go? And so oftentimes what they do is they keep coming back. Bear Lake seems to be our Eiffel Tower. People want to keep coming back to that area, so they might go off a little bit, but then they circle around and come back. Yeah. So continuing to see that folks usually try to not go that far from Bear Lake in case they can get back up there. So in the last couple of years, we've defined the purpose and need for our day use visitor access strategy, continuing to look at what our desired conditions are, developing draft concepts of various management strategies, continuing to look at the shuttle as an important tool, but not necessarily the only tool, and then continuing to seek funding to assist us with our planning process as well. Our next step in our DUVAS process is our stakeholder meetings for feedback on potential concepts. So we look forward to coming back this winter to talk with you all about what are some of just our general concepts, not alternatives at this point, but just really brainstorming some of our concepts. Then once we have those stakeholder meetings with other governmental entities, we'll then go to the public with what those potential concepts are, and then we'll look for what the appropriate National Environmental Policy Act pathway is. We continue to hear from visitors that they're not coming back because of our level of visitation, so that concerns us. We want to continue to look at how we can have this visitor experience be really key to our visitors, particularly at Rocky when we have so many generations that come back year after year. We want to make sure we don't lose that as well. Also like to kind of, conclude this conversation with highlighting what the National Park Service mission is. As far as truly it's to preserve and protect this resources so that 50 years from now, people still have the same amazing experience as they do today. And also making sure that we're providing amazing recreational enjoyment for all of us today as well. And there's a reason that people come to Rocky. It's an amazing place. Protects the Southern Rockies ecosystem, all the things that you close your eyes and think about with the Rocky Mountains. We have that and people love it. It's a good problem to have, that people are engaging with their national parks and public lands again, but we just need to continue to make sure we're protecting those resources. And I also just wanted to wrap up my comments highlighting, I think you all are very well aware of this, Rocky Mountain National Park is one of the busiest search and rescue parks in the country. We're usually the third most busiest. Our level of visitation, it hasn't really mattered. We've always been a busy SAR park. It's because of the recreational opportunities. We're an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction, so we manage and coordinate all the search and rescue incidents in the park. But we also rely heavily on a lot of our partners, and so we wanted to take this opportunity to share our appreciation and gratitude to Larimer County Search and Rescue. That's under, obviously, Larimer County Sheriff's Office. Also, Diamond Peak Ski Patrol is also part of Larimer County SAR, as well as their dog teams. They assist us in a variety of incidents, and so we wanted to make sure that we give kudos to them as well, to you all today.
Is that Mount Meeker?
It's a combination of locations. The one on the bottom right, you're exactly right. That's Mount Meeker, and that was during the search and rescue for Brian Perry last year, who was a Fort Collins resident. Then you also see, we have a lot of search and rescues in the winter as well. So those are a variety of recent search and rescue incidents that have occurred in the park. So thank you again for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have for us.
Questions, commissioners? Commissioner Collis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentations. I have a couple of questions regarding the forest health management practices, the prescribed burns as you depicted in the wildland-urban interface. Are you also looking at reducing the fuels in other ecosystems like up higher in lodgepole pine, or where there's an accumulation of fuel that could contribute to more intense fires? What are you doing about that?
We do have a hazard tree program, and we've got a crew that goes around to areas that are populated by people. So we take care of hazard trees where they're near roads, trails, picnic areas, campgrounds, wherever people are going to be. We don't have the program, we don't have the funding to be able to, handle the wilderness. 95% of the park is wilderness. So we are very focused on where visitors go. And we've got a very robust fuels program we stack those sticks all summer long, and then we burn them once we get the proper conditions in the wintertime.
And we do some mitigation work around, as Darla mentioned, where people are sleeping. So in our wilderness backcountry sites, we do some hazard tree work around those areas as well.
300 of them.
Yeah.
Couple more.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you indicated that the revenue you generate from visitation exceeds your budget, and I'm wondering, are you allowed to use that money, the extra money, for deferred maintenance?
So yes, the money that we collect from fees, first of all, we only keep 80% of that. 20% gets cut right off the top, and it goes to all the other parks that don't collect fees across the nation. And then from that remaining 80%, we pay operation of our campgrounds and the shuttle system as well, our transit. And so what's left is not a lot left. But from that, then we have 55% that is required to be used for deferred maintenance. So yes.
Thank you. My last question would be regarding the traffic jams and how tailpipe emissions might be affecting air quality. Can you speak to that? Have you been able to do any analyses about the air quality of Rocky Mountain National Park and the impact on different ecosystems, vegetation and water, both from air pollution that's coming from down here and air pollution that's being created because of the high volume of automobiles, vehicles?
At Rocky, we've had a very robust research program actually done through USGS, Jill Barron, 30 plus years of nitrogen deposition research on the lock. And I can tell you're very familiar with so Lock Vale. And it showed that we did have a significant impact of nitrogen deposition in the park. And so demonstrating that obviously if this research was taking place at the lock, likely other high alpine lakes were having the same impacts. A lot of it has to do with upslope conditions. So a lot of this, a lot of the sources are coming up from the valley, and then the Continental Divide basically acts as a barrier, and then the nitrogen comes down from there. We are one of the only parks that entered into an agreement in the mid-2000s with the State of Colorado Public Health and Environment as well as EPA. Since we're not a regulatory agency, we're kind of the canary in the coal mine in working with those agencies who can look at how we can lower those emissions. And looked at a variety of sources. Many of that were coming from vehicles along the Front Range and other sources. Feedlots, and also utility companies. And so because the agriculture is more voluntary, we've worked really closely with the ag industry to look at kind of best practices when it comes to feedlots or fertilizing during certain temperatures, because the research does show that it's coming, the winds are taking it in and then it's depositing it in the park. So we continue to work with the state to look at how the emissions and just how the nitrogen is changing over the years. But the sources seem to be coming more from outside the park than they are inside the park. That said, we also work very closely with our bus fleet to make sure that it's as green as possible, as well as our fleet of vehicles that are tied to Rocky Mountain National Park, making sure that they're as clean as they can be. It's a long answer to your question, but there's a variety of different research and sources on air quality in the park. We're also concerned about ozone and haze as well.
Anything else?
That's
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Are there other strategies that other parks are using to deal with the high visitor counts that we're not using yet that you might think about implementing?
I can start that off. Yes, we are paying very close attention to not just what the Park Service is doing, but the Forest Service is doing some very cutting edge visitor management as well. Here, even in Colorado, the Hanging Lakes, are you familiar with that? Mm-hmm. They've put in a permit system and a shuttle system, and it appears to be working well. Some of our other colleagues in the Park Service have implemented parking permitting or timed entry. Haleakala in Hawaii only allows a certain amount of cars per day to go up, and so there is some of that that's beginning to happen. Looking at some combination of reservation systems, shuttle systems, permit systems, with the idea being, you know, once culture gets used to doing it, it becomes, you know, kind of commonplace. So for example, you know, we kind of consider Rocky our Eiffel Tower, you know, our gem here in Colorado. And so we're very interested in ensuring that the visitors continue to have an excellent experience. And if that, you know, it could mean down the road that we're coming back to talk to you about some ideas about how could that work if we had some type of reservation system or some type of permit system in conjunction with the shuttle system to preserve that excellent visitor experience and the resources as well. So we're watching a number of different parks and the Forest Service. I'll be speaking at the Governor's Conference here at the end of the month in September to talk about some of those ideas. Working with the, what is it, what's the forest?
White River.
White River. I always want to call it White Pine. The White River Forest that are that have, you know, implemented some of those visitor use strategies and are having some pretty good success.
And they've done it at Maroon Bells as well.
Yeah, Maroon Bells. So Colorado is kind of on the leading edge of really embracing this. And Kyle mentioned the NOCO places 2020, 2050. That is, you know, a large contingency of federal, local, state entities here on the Front Range that are looking at how do we work together to resolve this issue, because it's not just our problem. It's not just the Forest Service's problem. It's the county's problem. It's the city's problem. We've all got this, you know, visitor issue, and like Kyle said, it's a good problem to have, but we want to make sure that it doesn't get so out of hand that we destroy the very place, you know, that people come here to see, and the reason we're all here living in Colorado.
We have similar situation with Horsetooth Mountain Open Space, which is our most popular open space, and we found that a lot of people weren't aware of the other open space alternatives and options available to them. So it's kind of like your Bear Lake situation. Everybody that goes to Rocky goes to Bear Lake, and they
true.
might not go to the McGregor Ranch area up in that part of the park. It's really nice hiking. So our folks made this little, it's kind of a passport, and there were 2 places in each open space that you did a rubbing on the posts. And if you filled all 16 of the rubbings out, you could get entered for a prize or something. And it was really a good idea.
Major prizes.
Major
Yeah,
prizes.
major prizes.
Water bottles.
Fabulous prizes.
Fabulous prizes, yeah.
But it was a good idea to encourage people to go to the less visited areas of our open spaces. And I know there's lots of Rocky Mountain National Park passports that are sold in bookstores and hiking things like that. But making people aware of the other options that aren't as visited, that are just as beautiful, really, worked really well for us.
Well, the Park Service universally is working on that. They are trying to bring more attention to the parks that are less visited, and we have quite a few here in Colorado. Bensold Fort, for example. There's, I mean, some of these places are a little out of the way, but they're really awesome places, and they tell amazing stories.
Yeah, the thing is, our population will increase 55% in the next 30 years, is what the state demographer tells us, which is, for our county, is equivalent to an entire new city of Fort Collins, placed in our county. So I know a lot of your visitors come from out of state and out of county, but a lot of counties, there's going to be a lot more people here. So it's not going to get easier for you guys or us.
Well, and I meant to mention as well when we were talking just briefly, we're also seeing spillover. So there is no quiet place to send people to in Rocky anymore. I mean, they've dispersed. And so now Lumpy Ridge Trailhead overflows onto county roads, and your engineers for Larimer County had to come up and put no parking signs all along Devil's Gulch Road. And then same with Lily Lake and same with Longs Peak. So we're continuing to see ramifications to neighboring neighborhoods that are being impacted by this level of visitation as well.
Great. So I talked a little bit with you before about Longs Peak Trailhead. Any plans in the near future to kind of address some of that congestion or not?
You know, certainly one of the things we've been looking at for years is the use of Lily Lake along Highway 7. And so that's obviously in Larimer County as well. And one of the things that we're looking at is trying to get the parking just on one side of Lily Lake. Right now, people cross Highway 7, which is a concern, so we're continuing, if you recall that we were looking at possibly doing a larger parking area on the same side as Lily Lake. That's still on the drawing board, looking for funding for that as well.
Yeah, that's definitely planned for out years. And, you know, we haven't yet addressed specifically Longs Peak, but that's something that we're looking at. You know, we're looking at all of the congested areas park-wide, but we're also looking at specific areas and trying to decide, you know, does it make more sense for us to really focus on just these 4 or 5 super congested places? If we deal with those, then, you know, it's like a balloon. You squeeze it here, it's going to come out somewhere else.
So I can't remember the name of there was an in-holding campground that had existed in Rocky Mountain National Park for 100 years or nearly 100 years. And recently, I think the Estes Park, or the Rocky Mountain National Park and Conservancy, is that what they call it? Or the
Rocky
and
Mountain
as well as partnership with the Estes Valley Land Trust and Larimer County Open Spaces had kind of worked together to acquire that campground. The family had decided to dispose of it, and they actually honored a 75-year-old agreement or handshake agreement they'd made with the federal government to offer first right of refusal to the National Park Service, and so it was purchased. So what was the campground called?
It's Cascade Cottages.
Right.
So it's actually little small cottages.
Right, and so we were up. I don't know if you guys went with me, but we went up and looked at it. It's really cool, and so there was talk at that time about trying to make it into a youth camp or something like that. Can you update the board on the progress that you've made on that front and what your plans are?
So just this summer, we've been doing actually over the winter and then this summer, we've been doing both the cultural studies that need to be done for that area and all of the natural resource studies. What's living there? Is there anything of concern? Because we need all that data to be able to, put it in a package of what are we going to do next. So this fall, we'll be presenting to the Rocky Mountain Conservancy. That's our 501c3 friends group that really did the major fundraising. I believe Larimer County contributed as well.
We did.
So we will be going back to them. We're having a session this fall to talk about what are our preferred alternatives. What are we going to do are we going to retain some of those little cabins? They're super cute little cabins, but a lot of them are extremely dangerous. They're on very rocky foundations, or they've got electrical outlets that are very faulty. So we'll probably, I'm just guessing, we're probably going to retain a few of those for historical means, but it remains to be seen. It could be indeed a youth camp.
Yeah, that's cool, and it's right on Fall River, right?
It is,
Correct.
It's
exactly.
Right past the entrance station.
Okay, so a couple years ago, there was a lot of talk about trying to maybe broaden the demographic portfolio or of the folks who use the national parks. Has that been successful?
I think it's happened naturally.
Okay.
I think we are seeing an increase in the diversity of our visitors for sure, and a lot of that, again, a large proportion of our visitation is Front Range. It's regional and local, and as we are seeing that become more diverse, then that's also the folks coming to the park. So that's kind of happening naturally. We do want to place more increased effort on trying to diversify our staff as well to be able to respond and help attract the diversity as well.
We absolutely need to get young people into outside and get them into their national parks. That's going to sustain your organization in the future long after all of us are gone, and get them to put these stupid phones down and go outside once in a while would be a really positive thing. We're very proud of Rocky Mountain National Park. I think it's the second or third most visited national park in the United States. Maybe, I don't know. It's behind
The third.
third,
Yes.
right behind the Grand Canyon, and there's some damn
Great
park
Smoky
in
Mountains.
yeah, in
Smokies,
Tennessee
which
or
doesn't
something.
really count
Oh, I
because
think
it's
that
like
goes,
Huge area.
it's
What the
just
hell would
like
you
a
go
gum.
there if you come here?
I've been there.
Tennessee? My gosh, no way.
I've been to Great Smoky Mountains, yeah.
But it's really a gem, and it's actually, John, I think you probably know this, but it's Rocky Mountain National Park's the #1 tourist destination in the state of Colorado. So take that, Eagle County, right?
Yes.
And so we're very proud of the resource that we have here.
and we're really happy with the work that you do on behalf of us. And we think it's a great service that we're provided by our national park staff. We think the world of those folks. They do great work every single day on behalf of the people of well, really the American people, but specifically we feel it here in Larimer County. So thanks a lot, and you pass it on to them, please. So thanks.
Well, we appreciate the good partnership and very much appreciate the support. So very happy to be in the county.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot. It's great to see you.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
to y'all.
We'll see you next year.
All right.
No, we
sounds
won't.
good.
We'll see you sooner than
We'll see you
that.
before then,
Yeah, we'll see you
yes.
sooner than that.
We'll talk visitor use more.
Okay, great. All right, we're gonna move on. Suzette Millette, the Executive Director of the North Front Range Metropolitan Planning Organization, is with us, and Alex Gordon, who's the Transportation Planner at the MPO, is also here. Hi.
Good morning.
How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Great. We're way behind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Suzette.
Hi, it's been a long time since I've been.
In the hot seat there. Well, introduce yourself and welcome.
Yes, thank you for having us this morning. I'm Suzette Millette. I'm the Executive Director of the North Front Range MPO, and with me is Alex Gordon. Alex is our one of our transportation planners too, and also our mobility coordinator. So our mobility coordinators, that sounds a little odd, really what do they do? We have a Larimer County Mobility Committee, thank you. I knew there was a C in there and it was Counselor Committee that meets every other month in Larimer County, and it is all the human services providers in the county along with the transit providers in the county that work on transportation issues in the county. So Alex is a perfect fit for the One Call, One Click Center that we're going to be talking to you about this morning. He's been project managing that on behalf of the North Front Range MPO. And with that, I'm going to let Alex run through a quick presentation. I know that you did have some other presentations on this as well. Our goal this morning is to help you see how all these parts and pieces fit together. So
Great.
hopefully we'll achieve that goal.
Hi, Alex.
Hello, thank you for having us today. I just wanted to start off with some background about where how the project started and where we are today. I know this started as a Larimer County project, but I think it's always nice to just kind of set the stage. So this project started off as a goal from the 2013 to 2018 Larimer County Strategic Plan, looking specifically at the mobility of older adults in unincorporated county. From that, the Larimer County Engineering Department and the Office on Aging teamed up for the Senior Transportation Needs Assessment, where they hired a consultant and they did a large outreach process, including focus groups and a survey. And they also looked at best practices, and they came back with 10 recommendations. Those 10 recommendations were strategic, educational, programmatic, just different ways to get people to work together, find efficiencies, build partnerships, let people know what already exists, and then figure out how to address the gaps that don't already have a solution. With those 10 recommendations, we formed a work group that's provided a lot of the input along the way, and that's made up of someone from the Office on Aging, someone from Community Resources, Development, Infrastructure, etc. Foothills Gateway, which is the community-centered board for Larimer County, Partnership for Age-Friendly Communities, Rural Alternative for Transportation, which is a volunteer transportation service in South Larimer County, and the North Front Range MPO. Oh, and the Larimer County Department of Health. So we had we tried to have a wide range of participation from both nonprofits and Larimer County, as well as us as a regional agency. And what we realized as part of that work group is that this is a very big project with a lot of different pieces. And so we've applied for a lot of grants, and in the next slide, I'll show how all of that fits together, but we realized that this is definitely built on partnerships. And then we also wanted to highlight, was it only a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
The 31st
Yeah.
of July.
Recently, we had the Northern Colorado Transportation discussion where Commissioner Donnelly and Commissioner Kirkmeyer from Weld County brought in the CDOT Executive Director, where we were able to say we are interested in improving mobility for older adults and people with disabilities, and be able to say, here are some of the projects that we're thinking about. There's also a contingent from the Northern Colorado Bicycle and Pedestrian Collaborative, so it was a truly multimodal discussion. And I think it went very well. We were able to talk directly to the CDOT executive director about this project and about the needs. And we were also able to talk to the chief director of the Office of Innovative Mobility and the director of the Division of Transportation Development. So basically the top 3 people at CDOT were able to hear about Larimer County moving forward with this project and how we're thinking about older adults and people with disabilities. So I think that was just a nice thing to highlight.
Yeah, it's really good.
So the other piece of background is, I feel like a one-call, one-click center is this very nebulous topic, and it is. It can be a very phased approach where it starts off as just an informational service. For example, the Larimer County Office on Aging provides a lot of resources about what currently exists, but they don't do any dispatching, they don't do any scheduling. They can just tell you, oh, that sounds like a good trip for Raft. So that's the very base level of what a call center could be. But on top of that, we can work with the providers to be able to schedule, confirm, and pay for rides to make it as seamless as possible for the user. We want to make sure that this is as accessible as possible, so someone with disabilities would be able to use it. And it's really about integrating as many different pieces of mobility as possible, so there is truly a one-stop shop for these. So this is just an example of a trip planner that's used as part of a mobility program in Vancouver, Washington, outside of Portland, where you can highlight whether you're a veteran, an older adult, if you're on Medicaid, and that way they can help figure out a funding source and a transportation provider. So that's ultimate goal, is to be able to look at all of these things and find the best ride for people as possible. As Suzette mentioned, we wanted to come to you and let you know how this process has worked and all of the pieces of the puzzle. So the 2 main players have been Larimer County through the Office on Aging and the Engineering Department and the NFRMPO. Larimer County has provided staff resources from those 2 departments mainly. They did the needs assessment, as I mentioned before, and then they also provided local match as part of a pool of money for this project for 2 out of the 3 grants that we've gotten. And so we were able to leverage about $20,000 in Larimer County funding with $120,000 in federal funds and nonprofit funds. So we were able to make this money go a lot farther. And the Larimer County Community Resources Service Area has led the steering committee that I mentioned earlier, that work group. So they help us keep on track. And so the MPO has provided my time and Suzette's time. We use the Larimer County Mobility Committee as a forum for those providers and advocates, and make sure that the consultants that we have on our projects are communicating with the people that would use this service, to make sure that there's investment and support on all sides, or as much support as we can get on all sides. And this is the handout that Suzette passed out, if you wanted to. So the other piece of this is we are working on an overall plan. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of different pieces of this process. So we have these 2 grants, we've had this work group, we have the needs assessment, and so we applied for funding through CDOT for a 5304 grant to do an implementation plan. And that, as part of that implementation plan, there will be a business plan. Who hosts this program? What does this program look like? How do we phase this so that it has the most support and that it makes sense on how things are working? And it also includes a financial piece, a financial plan to figure out, we want this to be as sustainable as of a program as possible. So how do we figure out what funding exists, and then how do we leverage that funding, and how do we phase it based on what funding exists? And we have also worked with the Partnership for Age-Friendly Communities. They've been the ones that that did the initial National Aging and Disability Transportation Center, where they convened the expert panel, which was absorbed into the Larimer County Mobility Committee. And they've also done the proof of concept project, where we're working with VIA Mobility Services that already operates a call center, and it's provided insight for some of the other Larimer County providers to figure out, what do we like about a one-call, one-click center? What are we uncomfortable with? So we can start addressing those questions now before we get too far into the process and we don't have the support that we would need to move forward. So In terms of where are we going and what our goals are, we've had a lot of success, I think, bringing people to the table and building these partnerships. So we want to keep that process going. We need the providers to be as comfortable as possible, because if we put in all of this effort and we don't have any providers, it's not going to go anywhere. So we want to make sure that we have the support of providers, that we have support of the users, and that way users can get the best ride possible and it makes sense for them, and it's not transferring 12 times because that was the cheapest way for them to do it. And then we also need to make sure that we balance the financial support with something that is long-term, because if we start small, there's only so much support that we can build, but we don't want to start too big that it doesn't go anywhere or that we can't sustain it. So our goal is to have a region-wide resource to connect the ride providers and users in as seamless a fashion as possible.
Have you had discussion with providers at
Yes.
this point?
Yeah.
Do they view this as something that might bring them new customers, or do they want to kind of do their own marketing, think they can get a competitive advantage over their competitors by doing their own thing? Are they generally favorable to this idea?
I think it's been generally favorable. I'm thinking of 2 volunteer transportation services where one, as part of this proof of concept project, they've been at the table, they've been so excited to use this technology, they want to be at this table because they see it as their path to sustainability and being part of the overall transportation system. And then there's another provider that's a little bit more nervous about, we built our reputation on the phone, like interaction. So if we give up this little piece that we feel our reputation is based on to this countywide or region-wide project, what does that mean for our interactions with our, and those are the types of questions that we really do want to address now. So if there is a concern of, okay, maybe you don't need this provider who's fully on board, signs up for this entire program, and then this other service that's a little bit nervous, we phase them in over time. And okay, you are uncomfortable about this, how can we address that? And then build support from there.
Is there a way to connect to the Uber and Lyft providers? to
I know that they're
plug into their system?
piloting that in other places, so I don't see anything stopping us from doing that.
Okay.
It hasn't really been part of the conversation yet, but I don't think there's anything stopping.
When do you
us from
think it
doing
will be operational?
A lot of that is based on what the implementation plan says, so we don't want to make any promises about what this looks like or how this is funded or anything until we have the business plan and the financial plan in place.
Okay.
That's due by the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay. How does Vancouver, Washington pay for the operation, the sustainable funding?
A lot of these programs are funded through 5310, which is an FTA program specifically meant for older adults and people with disabilities. There's a lot of grant funding available as well. We've built a lot of support with the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. We've already gotten 2 of their grants. So I think that there are a lot of resources that we could look to.
Are they
for funding.
multi-year?
What was that?
Are they multi-year grants? Because, I mean, you don't want to have to every year depend on
Right. Well,
short-term grants, right?
for,
Ideally.
so for 5310, we apply every year through CDOT. So that's just kind of the way that it goes.
Okay.
They have to walk the line very carefully between just guaranteeing us.
Right.
But
it's available
Exactly.
every year? Okay.
Comes
All
every
right.
year, but it's not a guarantee.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alex and Suzette. Have you taken into consideration the gaps in the county regarding high-speed internet and broadband, and how this could serve as a barrier to making sure that folks have access? I would just add to my question that yesterday we did have a meeting with here at the county to discuss how do we continue the progress on our broadband initiative, and the opportunities for collaboration with the work that you all are doing, I think, are out there. So, but I'm curious what you have thought about regarding the issues with broadband and high speed.
That has been brought up a few times, and I think it's always come back to we need to make sure that there's a person that can answer the phone, because we also, through the survey that was done as the needs assessment, there were a lot of older adults that even if they know how to use technology, they don't want to. They want to be able to talk to somebody. So because there are people with that mindset, there needs to be someone who can answer a phone. But we also want to make sure that this is
So
a long-lasting program. So there's also been talk about a website and an app. So trying to make it as diverse of a program as possible to to address maybe there's less internet there, or maybe they're more technologically advanced and they don't like talking to people. I don't know. So, yeah.
That's both of us. He doesn't like to talk on, only like to talk on the phone, and he hates to talk on the phone. So, how did the pilot go? Have you really been able to analyze, because we have run a pilot program,
Yes. So
that
that
went for about a month, and how did that work?
So rides are being given until the end of August. We got an extension with the grant to go through the end of October. So
Okay.
rides will go through the end of August, and then September will be convening everybody and what was the provider's experience with it, what was the rider's experience with it, what was the systematic impact. So that'll be addressed throughout the rest of August and into September. As of August, we had provided about 250 rides through the service, and that was a mix of Heart and Soul Paratransit, Raft, Saint, and Z-Trip. So a taxi company, a private transportation company, and then 2 transportation providers.
Volunteers. Yeah.
So we've gotten some very good feedback, some people that really like this a part of it. We've also worked with VIA, who already has their call center, to see how did this work for them, to see if that's an option of, rather than recreate a call center, could we partner with them and work that way. So we have a lot of disparate pieces of data that we do need to bring together. But that pilot started in May and will end in August.
Do you have another question?
One
That led to
last-
another question? Okay.
Just, are you aware that I think as of September 1st, VEO, the transportation broker that provides NEMT services, is going to be replaced by a different
Yes.
provider?
Yes. And that's one of the other things that's been underneath the surface, is the conversation of brokerages, because a lot of other one-call, one-click centers provide the NEMT brokerage service, and that might be a way that the Vancouver, Washington example pays for their service, is that they can use the Medicaid funding. But we are in no way saying that that's going to happen. So, but that has been part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think part of what we're talking about is sort of right-sizing this to start with. I mean, we want to be big enough that we're providing some services and some meaningful rides to people, and but we also don't want to make it too big or too small. But there's always a potential to grow and take on new or different things in the future.
So in terms of next steps, as Suzette said, the 5304 grant will end in December. The NADTC grant will run through October. We would like to identify a stable funding source over the next 3 to 5 years to really build the program. And obviously, we'd like to kick off the call center so that this has a purpose. And to do that, we need hardware and software. We need to make sure that there's dedicated staff to it, and we need to make sure that we have a budget that is achievable and realistic. So I think we've talked about a few of these things already. I think one of the things that came out of the Northern Colorado transportation discussion was the need to look at different counties. The MPO staff actually just had a meeting with Boulder County staff about how a lot of South Larimer County residents are now going to Longmont. So we think regionally going to Weld County, but the southern part of Larimer County is definitely looking more towards Boulder County, and Fort Collins to Boulder, City of Boulder along US 287 and 119 are becoming one long commuting route. So that's definitely something that we'd like to look more into, and I don't think that it would be combining programs, but it would definitely be looking how to integrate the programs and try to make as seamless a ride as possible. One of the other things that we heard about was needing to work with health professionals, making sure that they understand that this service could exist, making sure that they understand the needs of the ride providers, and that the ride providers also understand the needs of health professionals. And we think that there's a way to find a lot of efficiencies in that. So that way, fewer rides are dropped. There's more of an understanding of, okay, this appointment is running late. Maybe we tell the taxi company and they can go pick up someone else in the meantime or move their trips around. Were there any other questions, comments, concerns?
No, just I want to tell the MPO what great work they've done on this. This was something that was developed as part of Larimer County Strategic Plan from 2013 to 2018. Great idea. even better idea was to work with you guys to help see what we could do. And so it's been very successful, so successful so far, in fact, that we when we you talked about the meeting we had with the CDOT executive director a couple weeks ago. Probably at least half of that room was Weld County. Over half, I think, was Weld County transit providers or service providers for senior transportation, and they really recognize the value of this program as well. And so I think that it's exciting to have that kind of energy. People are really excited to have access to some kind of program to help the folks who might live in a small community get to the hospital in Fort Collins or Loveland or even Greeley. And so we know that that's a really important part of allowing people to age in place and stay in their homes longer. And so it's really great work. I'm excited to see how it goes, and it's the future looks very bright for this program. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you for your time.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And is this coming to the MPO Council at any point?
Yeah, sure.
So,
As
okay.
part of the 5304 grant, one of the things is they need to prepare a presentation that would go to the county commissioners and to the council, the planning council.
Okay.
So at the end, that'll have the business plan and the financial plans.
Very good. So we'll look forward to seeing that.
Perfect. Thank
All
you.
right, we have our county clerk is here, Angela Myers. She's been sitting here patiently.
And riveted by this wonderful conversation.
I
You
know.
guys are doing amazing
I'm
work.
sure.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. She's bettering us up.
As the park department as well. Wow. Larimer has so much to be proud of.
So there were pretty significant changes to election law in the past legislative session, and so you're here to talk a little bit about that and some of the challenges that might present you as the chief elections official here in Larimer County. So welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all of you. Appreciate your attentiveness today, and Linda as well. Yes, we had some interesting legislation this year with our omnibus elections bill, but that it doesn't really stop or even start there. We had some major changes in 2016 with respect to our elections associated with citizens deciding they wanted Colorado to participate in the presidential primaries, as well. What that means then is that we have 4 back-to-back elections every 4th year. Every presidential year we will have four back-to-back elections. There is no window of time during that span that we are not in elections mode. And then, as you said, the omnibus elections bill, despite strong opposition from me and from you folks, I appreciated your support in opposing that bill. It still passed. It was improved somewhat, so we don't have nearly the ramifications that we had originally, but we are still going to have to add voter service and polling centers, as well as significantly add to our drop box counts. All of those things create complexities and add to the challenges of administering the election. As well, that bill came with some phasing in of the process, meaning that we have to stage deployment at those sites rather than having 2 very defined timeframes for that. And that bill also allows for statewide ballots, which adds another element of complexity. As well, that bill comes with a tiering system for counties. Larimer County right now is in a Tier 1 situation, but in 2021 we will be a Tier 0 county, at which point we will have to add additional VSPCs and still more 24-hour drop boxes. Given these complexities and these changes in the election law, in addition to others that I've not mentioned so detailed, including automatic voter registration, unaffiliated voters participating in primary elections, and those type of things, we need a staff that is more dedicated to the elections process. And I am asking your support for 2 additional FTEs in elections. I don't need the funding because, quite frankly, the work's got to get done anyway. And so if I don't have FTEs performing these duties, I'm going to have temporaries or LTEs that don't come to the table with the same level of commitment. They're wonderful people, but they don't have the same level of commitment. The staff who are in place cannot step away and create some semblance of work-life balance for themselves and give their work to a temporary where they could do that with an FTE. And we're a critical mass, given all of those changes over the past several years, we need to have 2 more FTE to provide a bench in elections.
Any questions? Commissioner, anything?
Yes.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Clerk and Recorder. I'm wondering, you indicated that your budget will allow for paying these 2 additional FTEs. Will that continue, or will there be a need to come to the commissioners for additional appropriations, in subsequent budget years?
I think it will be fine. The commissioners have had a history of supporting elections to the level necessary. We also have a history in the Clerk and Recorder's office of doing our best to keep those costs down in real time. And as I said earlier, we would have to have folks to do this work anyway. So whether we put those dollars toward creating a long-term success in the county or using temporaries, we've still got to use the money. So I don't think it's going to have any long-term effect to the budget for that reason.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I imagine going forward, we will see continued voter turnout, and so therefore we need to be prepared for that.
You're exactly right. We had numbers in 2018 that were at the levels we expected to see in 2020. So that also is part of what's driving this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Cavallo, look for a motion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I move to approve the addition of 2 FTEs within the Clerk and Recorder Elections Department.
Very good. We have a motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion is passed 3-0. Stay put.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Here's some exciting stuff coming up. It's the end of our the Board of Equalization referees have finished their work for the assessment appeals process, and so the Board of Commissioners will now convene as the Board of Equalization. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Board of County Commissioners convene as the Board of Equalization.
Very good. We have a motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion is passed 3-0. Hi.
Hi.
Introduce yourself.
I am Angela Myers, your Larimer County Clerk and Recorder, responsible in my department for supporting you as the Board of Equalization in administering the Board of Equalization process for Larimer County.
Very good. So we have a list of, I believe we have a list of recommendations from our referees. How did the hearing process go this year?
I'm very pleased to say that we made some fundamental improvements in the way we administer the process, and I'm very, very proud of how that went. We're improving as we go along. I'm happy to detail some of those improvements that we made. We created a video for citizens so they understand the process before they get to the table, which I think it's such a mysterious, if you don't do it, you don't do it, and you have no concept of how it works. So we provided some understanding of that, took them on a walk through the process. We streamlined the paper movement between CBOE and the assessor's office. I appreciated so much the collaborative tenor between the assessor's office and us as we did that. Those, we no longer pass paper back and forth. Now we pass the information electronically. We scan it in at our end. We actually enter the data at our end, which allows for a second validation on their part of the process when it gets to them. And it also created for us improved reporting to you guys. We also change the way we send out schedule letters. We are going to try for a few improvements again next year. For so many years, the CBOE process got really no attention. It is the tiniest minutia of what we do in the clerk's office compared to the other things. But in recent years, we've really paid a lot of attention, and I think those things are paying off, and I think every single year we're going to see improvements coming. We also supported operations through more robust temporaries this year, which we really needed because recording operations have been very busy, and we just needed that support to make those processes happen effectively. I've got some VIPs coming. They're not quite here yet, but are they out there?
In the hall, I think.
We're going to have them come on in. But before we do that, I want to talk about your report for this week,
Okay.
if I may.
Yes.
You will remember last week Nancy mentioned that the 31st was not put on your report last time, as it typically would have been. It is included on this report, so you can see that. The other thing, on the 4th page, at the very bottom, there is the next to the last line. I want to make sure that your report has a correct number. We had a typographical error in there. That number should be in the next to the last column on the right, 26,974,700.
And when you say fourth page, do you mean fourth sheet or fourth side?
4th sheet. So you got the first page back, second page, and the back of the second page.
Okay,
If you got them front to back. If you don't have them front to
yeah, we
back,
do
it's
have
your
front to
fourth page.
back.
What are we
That's
supposed to be looking at?
Down at the bottom,
Yes.
like CSU,
next to the last line. I want to be sure your numbers there are correct.
CSU Research Foundation.
Yep,
Okay,
26974,700.
I'm not seeing that.
No.
And that's why I'm correcting for you.
CSU Research Foundation.
It's the second column.
Colorado State University.
Come on in, VIPs.
Maybe, let's start with the account
you
number.
talking
What's
about the
the
account
account
number?
number on the line you're looking at, Angela?
R1652358.
Okay,
Oh, that's right on the top of
That's
the
at the
next one.
top of a next.
Oh, I'm
our
sorry,
next-
yours printed out differently than mine. My apologies.
What about it?
The second column, that number should be 26974,700.
Okay, it's a 7 and 9 are reversed
Right,
on ours.
and the last column should be 6079900.
Okay,
Okay?
we got it.
Okay, just don't want you to be,
$6 million? Value. What is that?
Yeah.
which then results in an update to your final numbers. Let's be sure you know what those are. If you look at the last page, second column, 1954292,700. Number should be. And the difference number, the last box should be a negative 112,534,674. Rather than 85,559,974. Because of that typographical error. Make sense?
You mentioned collaboration between the assessor's office and your office, and probably a lot of other folks. And John doesn't know this because when Tom and I first started, we didn't get a nice table report like this. It was actually a lot of work to tabulate all that. I don't know how all that was done, but when Lou asked, should we see, the
Detail.
detail and the recommendations, Nancy brought this stack of papers in. He didn't ask again, as I recall. But we talked for like a year about what all was necessary to get it into a form that really was transparent, clear, and a great summary. And I don't know how all that happened. Probably the great people you're going to introduce, but it sure is really nice to have this. It's a great advancement over what we had before. Great.
Although in the moment we weren't able to provide that, we did not walk away with closed ears. We figured out how to make it happen properly, and that's exactly what
Yeah,
you're
I'm
talking
sure it wasn't easy,
about. No, it wasn't,
system.
clearly.
especially when there's so many of them.
But now it is much more automated. I think last time we provided you with some summaries, but they were not
Yeah,
nearly as
they did.
automated
They
as we
did.
have this year. And so we're
Really
continuing
nice.
to improve on that, yeah.
Very
And
nice.
that collaboration with respect to the technology is part of what enables that to
Very
happen.
nice. I'm sure, yeah.
So efficiently.
IT people probably helped.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to express my appreciation because it is my understanding that you accommodated the needs of a citizen who is blind or sight impaired, visually impaired, because he had a Board of Equalization hearing scheduled, and I think you changed that because more time was needed to translate the documents into Braille. So I want to express my appreciation for your office doing that.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So you've got some guests that we're going to recognize in just a moment. Why don't we approve the recommendations of the Board of
Before you
Equalization
approve, would you like me to give you the quick summary Nancy
Oh, yeah.
typically does?
Good, do it.
760 total accounts during this approval, what you're seeing here, what you're approving today, 760 total accounts were heard at 206 hearings. 224 of those accounts were adjusted. Of those, 40 were stipulated. And of those, of those 206 hearings, or the 760 properties, 525 accounts were denied and 10 were withdrawn, just so you know.
Very good.
Okay,
Great work. Commissioner.
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve the recommendations of the Board of Equalization referees for the hearings of July 31st through August 2nd, 2019.
Very good. We have a motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion has passed 3-0.
May I ask my VIPs to join behind me over here?
Please do.
If you guys would all stand up and come this way. Joanne and Kaylee, you actually should have been here, but we were trying to get everybody up here, so they were trying to make sure that happened efficiently, or as effectively as we could. Joanne? I want to take a moment to give public kudos to Joanne Hertz
Yeah.
and Kaylee Ogden, who took boots on the ground responsibility for administering CBOE operations this year. As well, Stephanie Grosskopf, who is taking our notes today, our recording supervisor, was thrown into the fire very early in her tenure with us and just really was effective right off the bat. Of course, Jared Jacquis, our application support specialist, and Nancy Testori, they are neither one here today, but they were absolutely instrumental in our success. There is no doubt about it. They orchestrate to a large degree and kept everyone nimble and informed. And as we all know, nothing happens successfully without support behind you. Yeah. These folks could not step away and do the job they do unless the rest of these wonderful folks took up the slack and took care of the day-to-day operations. We are statutorily required to do what we do in the timely fashion that we do it, and that can't lag behind. So I want to give recognition to the entire team, including Christine Klinsman, who is not here today. If you would raise your hand so I don't have to point you out, guys. Deidre, Elizabeth, Janelle, Lucretia, and Darian, who just joined us. She actually is our newest team member, and she just caught the tail end.
Okay.
But you can't leave any of the team out.
Come back tomorrow.
I am, Larimer County is blessed. I am blessed to have this team in recording.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good job.
And record. Yeah, great work. Yeah, you did great work. Yeah, we're so proud of you. And you know, and in the real world, back in the real world, I was a user of the services of the Larimer County Clerk and Recorder's Office many years ago, decades ago, frankly. I was a professional land surveyor, and the service provided by the clerk's office has always been really a tremendous asset to people in Larimer County. You guys do great work, and our public records are really. I think that kind of one of our prize jewels here is the way that the records have been maintained, and the ability for people to really access their public records is really cool. It's what makes local government geeks like me so excited, is the work that you all do, and it's really the thing that more than almost anything else, the work of the county clerks is really kind of what inspired me to want to serve in local office. So thanks so much for all you do. We really appreciate it. It's great work, and it's not lost on us that you do all of these Board of Equalization stuff and also still have to do all the regular office work as well. So it's very well done. You did a great job. We're really proud of you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right. We're going to adjourn as the Board of Equalization and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners. Commissioner Johnson.
I move to adjourn the meeting as the Board of Equalization and reconvene as the Board of County Commissioners.
Very good. We have a motion. All those in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion passed 3-0. Have a good day. See you later.
Thank you.
All right. Linda, there's a next item on the agenda is an executive session to discuss a future park opportunity. Is there a reason why we wouldn't just do the county manager update prior to that and the commissioner activity reports?
Well, I know everyone is just waiting for the county manager report, so I think we should do that.
I assumed it was
as soon
because
as
you
possible.
typically speak too long during your update, and someone must have a reason to need to get out before you would finish. But I'm going to go ahead and think that you're going to be short for the brief today. So go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's been a lot of ongoing work with our partners, and I should have thanked the MPO when they were here. They've had a hand along with CDOT and our municipal partners in moving to further evolve the proposal on transportation funding for the region. The commissioners will consider that in a few weeks about placing it on the ballot or not, and in the meantime, a lot of work is being done on details that will be covered in IGAs and bylaws for the governance groups if the proposal moves forward. But there's high interest in those details now, so we're grateful to all of our partners who have been working on that. Thank you, commissioners, for your evening work. There's another meeting tonight and some scheduled next week, so we continue to have the opportunity to confer with our partners as the proposal gets further refined. Last week was department head meeting. I love department head meeting because our staff is just so dedicated and they do such a wide variety of work for the community. But we come together once a month and talk about things that are kind of the business of running the county. So I know it doesn't sound that fascinating, but we worked on things like our email retention policy. That's a big deal because when we get Cora requests, somebody has to go through all of those emails and whatever is in the system we must relinquish. And so if we are searching for some keyword, apparently the attorney's office finds all kinds of interesting things.
I bet.
Don't put too many of your vacation plans in your email because those keywords might turn up. We also had a report from the facilitation team. This is a group that the county started years ago as both a cost-saving measure, a service to the community, and as a staff development role. So much of our work, both as professionals and in our personal life, involve strong communication and ways to have dialogue in constructive ways that actually lead to solutions. And in a word, that's called facilitation. So we put together this team. We use them internally. We sometimes provide the service externally as well. And it helps our staff learn how to conduct better meetings. It helps them work towards solutions in groups. And it also saves us a lot of money from hiring, to prevent us from hiring outside facilitators. So they were talking about their services, making sure that we can keep the team well staffed. And it was good to hear that they're doing good work for us still. We had the emergency management folks come and talk about the continuity of operations plan. We sure hope we never need that plan, but if we do, it'll be great to have it well prepared. And we had the kickoff meeting with representatives from United Way. So each year the county does a fundraising campaign. Employees chip in last year to the tune of, I think, someplace in the neighborhood of $43,000 that goes into the local community to provide assistance for various nonprofits that serve members of our community in need. And they're kicking off the campaign again this year. So if any department heads are listening, here's a reminder that you need to appoint your liaison or your coordinator for your department because the campaign is kicking off. Like each week, I do a lot of coordination meetings with other agencies, and last week I met with Dr. Sandra Smyser from Poudre School District. She is just a fascinating and warm person. And I know that we think that, we are, a lot of our work on land use and things like that are really touching close to home for people. But the school district is talking about people's kids. So it's great to have such a strong leader at the helm of that organization. She's a strong collaborator, and I always enjoy my conversations with her. So that's a very brief report of my activities last week.
It didn't seem that brief from this side of the task, but okay. I'll take your word for it. Commissioner activity reports. Commissioner Kvalas, what were you up to?
Well, let's see if I can top the brevity of the previous report.
I don't know.
I did have the opportunity to participate in the Larimer County Fair and Rodeo. It was quite an experience, all 3 nights.
Yeah.
I'm sure my colleagues will say more about that. I think on Wednesday, I went to the Salud Family Health Center, and they had their annual farmers market where they're out there on the west side on the LaPorte Avenue Clinic, where that's located, as well as the one on Blue Spruce. and it's small scale, but people come by and they get produce and vegetables and things like that. And I got to interact with a bunch of people. In particular, there were two young people from the Poudre Valley Mobile Home Park, and they were handing out carrots and apparently they've established a garden there at Poudre Valley Mobile Home Park, and I thought that was great. On Friday, I attended the State Board of Human Services meeting in Steamboat Springs. And for folks who may not know, the State Board of Human Services, previously Commissioner Johnson served on that board. But basically, we look at approving rules that are put in place as a result of changes in state law dealing with human services, child care, child welfare, etc. One of the topics that we discussed was the recent proposed rule change by the U.S. Department of Agriculture regarding SNAP, or food assistance. And so that's something that we're gathering more data on to determine if there's a course of action for the county or the county association to take. Then, I still have time, right, Commissioner?
Oh, yeah, keep going.
Oh, keep going, yeah.
Keep going.
Yield my time. It's
Yeah, we'll yield our time. We're on the edge of our seats.
Okay, the last thing in conclusion is that on Saturday, this past Saturday, I had one of my community conversations. This one was in LaPorte at the Mio Mai Coffee and Pie. We had about 20 people or so. We had the county assessor there, Bob Overbeck, and it was a good conversation, spirited to say the least. And so I'm glad we had that opportunity to talk about the notice evaluations and some of those things happening.
How'd you do? How'd it go?
It went fine. I also talked to some of the appraisers in the assessor's office to better understand what happens after, to make sure that people are sure what courses of action they can take if they're not satisfied with the outcome of the Board of Equalization decision on the part of the referees. And there are some courses of action that folks can take. So that's all I have to say, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. Activity report, Commissioner, anything you want to
I
mention?
don't have anything to share.
Nothing that, nor do I, anything that I didn't do with my colleagues. So we'll move on. We have 3 items on the agenda for executive session discussions. One is a strategic discussion of a future park opportunity. There's no decision expected on this. I think this is just an update or maybe to bring to the board's attention. The second item is an executive session presentation of completed record, discussion regarding legal standards and procedures, and setting the date for a decision regarding exclusion of property from the Estes Valley Recreation and Parks District. There's a formalized process if someone seeks to be excluded from a special district, and the board will hear that item in the future about some property owners that have petitioned to be removed from the Parks and Rec District up there. And then a further executive session with regards to Hildebrand versus Larimer County. No decision expected on that item either. How do you want to do these? We've got the parks people here, so why don't we do that one first?
And then come back
Then we'll-
in for decisions.
Well, that's E. The other 2 are B. Why don't we? Do you care, Stephanie, how we do it? Okay. So do you want to go into executive session, come back out, and then re-enter it with B? For B with the attorney?
Looks like we'll have to.
That'll be a different set of characters. So, Commissioner Johnson, you've got the thing. You want to do the E session real quick?
Sure, and that would be easier for these
So you'll
guys.
how long is the update going to be?
Because they don't have to record Bs.
Okay, so Stephanie, let's come back and record the motion again in 10 or 15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah, we'll record the first one with the parks, but we won't need to record the second and the third one.
Right. But we'll have to record the motion as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you,
Very
Mr. Chairman. I move the Board of County Commissioners go into executive session for a discussion of a future park opportunity pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, paren 4, paren E, determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiation, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators.
Very good. We have a motion. All those in favor signify with an ae.
Aye.
That motion has passed 3-0. The board is now in executive session for 15 minutes or so. Then we're going to reconvene in open session and then re-enter executive session. All right, the board is going to come back to order. We have just concluded an executive session with our Natural Resources Department. The board is now going to enter executive session for 2 items, an executive session to hear a presentation of the completed record and discussion of the legal standards and procedure, setting the date for a decision regarding exclusion of property from the Estes Valley Parks and Recreation District, and then an executive session with regards to some litigation, Hildebrand versus Larimer County. Both those items, one of those items does have a decision. So that's yours, Frank. So the board will reconvene. How long do you need for these 2 items?
Mine is 10 or 15 minutes.
And how long is yours?
5 to 10.
Okay, so maybe half an hour, and we'll come back and we'll probably take some kind of legal action. I should note for the record that Commissioner Kafalis has stepped out of the room for just a minute at the conclusion of executive session, so we will not be voting on this motion, but will be joining us in executive session here in just a moment. So, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Board of County Commissioners go into executive sessions for the 2 items enumerated by the chair pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, paren 4, paren B, conferences with an attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions.
Very good. We have a motion. All in favor signify with an aye.
Aye.
That motion is passed 2-0. The board is now in executive session. We will reconvene in open session in approximately half an hour. All right, the board's going to come back to order. We just concluded our executive session. The board is going to take action. Commissioner Kafalis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to accept the record as presented and set September 24th, 2019, 9 a.m. as part of the Administrative Matters meeting as the date to issue a decision pursuant to Colorado Revised Statutes 32-1-501, whether to exclude certain properties from the Estes Valley Recreation and Parks District.
Very good. We have a motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion has passed 3-0, I think. Manager Hoffman, is there any further business to come before the board this morning?
None today, Commissioner.
Very good. The board will stand adjourned.
Thank you.